She married A.S.X ADDICT. What she did next finally landed her in prison. Her hands trembled as the cold steel cuffs clicked around her wrists, the metallic sound echoing through the courtroom like a death knell. Tamara Collins, devoted wife, elementary school teacher, pillar of her community, stood in her navy dress suit, now a convicted felon. The judge's gavel had fallen. 3 years in a women's correctional facility. But this wasn't a story about crime. This was a story about love twisted into desperation, about a woman who'd given everything to save a man drowning in his own demons, and about the moment she finally chose to save herself, no matter the cost. Before we dive into Tamara's journey, if you've ever struggled with loving someone who couldn't love themselves, or if you believe in second chances even when the world says you're a fool, hit that like button, subscribe to hear more raw, real stories, and drop a comment below. Have you ever sacrificed too much for love? Let's talk about it. The rain hammered against the windows of Morningside Elementary as Tamara Collins erased the day's math equations from the whiteboard, her classroom finally quiet after the chaos of 28 third graders. At 32, she'd built a life she was proud of, a cozy townhouse in East Atlanta, a career that filled her with purpose, a tight circle of friends who called her Tam Tam and showed up with wine whenever her voice cracked over the phone. But lately, the silence of her empty home had grown louder than the children's laughter that filled her days. She gathered her tote bag, overflowing with ungraded spelling tests, and locked her classroom door, her brown eyes catching her reflection in the darkened window. Her locks were pulled back in a neat bun, a few gray strands weaving through the black despite her relative youth. Stress, her mother said. Loneliness, Tamara thought but never said aloud. Her phone buzzed as she walked toward the parking lot, the rain soaking through her cardigan. Shanice, 6:47 p.m. Girl, you coming to Jasmine's birthday thing Saturday? And don't say you're grading papers. I will come to your house. Tamara smiled despite herself, fingers hovering over the screen. She was about to type an excuse when she collided with someone stepping out of the school's administrative building. Oh my, I'm so sorry. The man's voice was deep, genuinely apologetic. Strong hands steadied her shoulders as her bag slipped, papers scattering across the wet pavement. No, it's my fault. I wasn't looking. Tamara dropped to her knees, frantically gathering the soggy spelling tests, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. He knelt beside her, helping collect the papers with careful hands. Let me help. I'm the idiot walking and texting in a rainstorm. When their eyes met, Tamara felt something shift in her chest, a flutter she hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. He was handsome in an understated way. White guy, probably late 30s, with kind hazel eyes, dark blonde hair dampened by rain, and a smile that seemed to apologize for more than just the collision. He wore khakis and a button-down with the sleeves rolled up, a visitor badge clipped to his belt. I'm Owen, he said, standing and offering his hand once they'd salvaged what they could. Owen Hendricks. I was just meeting with Principal Morrison about the new literacy program grant. Tamara Collins. 3rd grade teacher. She shook his hand, noticing the warmth of his palm, the absence of a wedding ring. You work for the school district? Educational consultant. I help schools develop reading intervention programs. He gestured toward the parking lot. Can I walk you to your car? It's the least I can do after destroying your multiplication homework. Spelling tests, Tamara corrected, laughing. And they were doomed anyway. Half of them still think friend is spelled F-R-E-N-D. They walked together through the downpour, and what should have been a 2-minute walk stretched into 15 as they lingered by her Honda Civic, talking about standardized testing and the best coffee shops in Atlanta and how neither of them had seen the latest Marvel movie despite everyone saying they should. I should let you go, Owen finally said, though he made no move to leave. Rain dripped from his hair onto his forehead. But, would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime? To discuss literacy intervention strategies, of course. Tamara felt her heart hammering. She hadn't been asked on a date in almost 2 years, not since the situationship with her ex had fizzled into uncomfortable small talk at the grocery store. I'd like that, she heard herself say. Saturday. 10 a.m. at Hodgepodge Coffee on Ponce. I'll be there. As Tamara drove home through the storm, she couldn't stop smiling. She didn't call Shanice back. Didn't think about the stack of ungraded papers or the parent-teacher conferences next week. She just replayed the moment Owen's eyes crinkled when he smiled, the way he'd carefully gathered her papers like they mattered. She didn't know then that she'd just met the man who would become both her greatest love and her most devastating mistake. Saturday morning arrived with golden sunshine that felt like a promise. Tamara changed outfits 4 times before settling on jeans and a burnt orange blouse that Shanice always said made her skin glow. She wore her locks down, natural and beautiful. Owen was already waiting outside Hodgepodge when she arrived, holding 2 coffees. I took a guess. Caramel latte with oat milk? How did you? Lucky guess. That smile again. But I got you a regular latte too, just in case. They found a corner table, and conversation flowed like they'd known each other for years. Owen told her about growing up in a small town in Ohio, his parents' divorce when he was 12, how he'd worked 3 jobs to put himself through college. Tamara shared stories about her students, her close-knit family in Savannah, her dream of one day opening a literacy center for underprivileged kids. You're incredibly passionate, Owen said, his gaze intense. It's refreshing. Most people I meet are just going through the motions. What about you? Tamara asked. What drives you? Something flickered across Owen's face, brief, almost imperceptible. I guess I just want to fix things. Make things better than they were. The coffee date stretched into lunch at a nearby taco place, then a walk through Piedmont Park where children played and couples lounged on blankets. As the sun began to set, Owen walked Tamara to her car, his hand brushing against hers, tentative, questioning. I had a really great time today, he said softly. Me too. Can I see you again? Maybe dinner next week. Yes, Tamara said, no hesitation this time. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. The kiss was gentle, sweet, perfect. As she drove home, Tamara felt something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The kind of hope that makes you believe in new beginnings and second chances and all the romantic comedy cliches you've sworn you'd outgrown. She didn't see the cracks yet. Didn't notice the way Owen's phone buzzed constantly throughout their date, or how he angled it away when checking messages. Didn't catch the slight tremor in his hands when he thought she wasn't looking, or the way his eyes darted toward every woman who passed by, lingering just a second too long. Love, in its early stages, is the best kind of blindness. 6 months flew by in a blur of romance that felt ripped from the pages of the novels Tamara secretly devoured on lazy Sunday mornings. Owen was attentive, thoughtful, present in ways that made her previous relationships feel like rough drafts. He brought her favorite takeout when she was drowning in grading. He showed up at her classroom with flowers, just because. He listened, really listened, when she talked about her dreams, her fears, her student struggles. He met her friends at Jasmine's belated birthday celebration. Shanice pulled Tamara aside in the bathroom, wine-tipsy and grinning. Girl, he's fine. And he looks at you like you hung the moon. Don't mess this up. I'm trying not to, Tamara laughed, but there was a tremor of fear beneath her joy. This felt too good. Too easy. When Owen invited her to his apartment for the first time, a sleek 1-bedroom in Midtown with minimalist furniture and too many self-help books on the shelves, Tamara noticed things that didn't quite fit. His phone face down on every surface. The way he disappeared into the bathroom for 20 minutes at a time. The laptop he snapped shut when she entered the room. Everything okay? She asked one evening as they cooked dinner together, his hands chopping vegetables with mechanical precision. Perfect, Owen said, kissing her temple. Better than perfect now that you're here. But that night, after they'd made love and he thought she was asleep, Tamara felt him slip out of bed. Through half-closed eyes, she watched him take his phone to the bathroom, saw the blue glow beneath the door for over an hour. When he finally returned, she pretended to stir awake. You okay? Couldn't sleep. Work email. The lie sat between them like a third presence in the bed. On their 9-month anniversary, Owen took Tamara to a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Atlanta skyline. The city glittered beneath them like scattered diamonds, and the food was exquisite, and Owen's hand trembled slightly as he reached across the table. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice tight. Tamara's heart stopped. This was it, the moment the fairy tale shattered. He was married. He was moving away. He didn't love her after all. "I'm in recovery," Owen said quietly. "Sex addiction. I've been in therapy for 2 years, attending SAA meetings 3 times a week. I should have told you sooner, but I was terrified of losing you." The words hung in the air like smoke. Tamara's mind raced, trying to process, to understand. "Sex addiction," she repeated slowly. Owen nodded, his eyes glistening. "It started in college, compulsive porn use, one-night stands, relationships I sabotaged because I couldn't be faithful. It destroyed my engagement 5 years ago. I hit rock bottom, and I got help. I've been sober, that's what we call it, for almost 3 years now. No porn, no hookups, no acting out. I'm working the program. I'm doing the work." He reached for her hand, and she let him take it, too stunned to pull away. "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, Tamara. You make me want to be better, to stay better. I understand if this is too much. If you want to walk away, I'll understand. But I love you. And I needed you to know the truth." Tamara looked at this man, this beautiful, broken man who'd shown her more tenderness in 9 months than she'd experienced in all her previous relationships combined. She thought about the self-help books on his shelves. The way he sometimes flinched when she reached for him unexpectedly. The bathroom disappearances that now made terrible sense. She should have run. Every rational cell in her body screamed at her to protect herself, to walk away before she got hurt. Instead, she squeezed his hand. "Thank you for telling me," she said softly. "That must have been so hard. You're not leaving." "I need time to process this," Tamara admitted. "But no, I'm not leaving. Not yet. Not if you're really doing the work." The relief that washed over Owen's face was profound. He raised her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "I am. I swear to you, I am." That night, as Tamara lay awake in her own bed, staring at the ceiling, she asked herself a question she should have answered differently. Can love really fix someone? Drop a comment below. Would you have stayed, or would you have walked away? Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones we make with our hearts instead of our heads. She chose to stay. God help her, she chose to stay. The first year of knowing Owen's truth was a masterclass in cautious optimism. Tamara educated herself, devouring articles about sex addiction, reading memoirs by partners of addicts, even attending 2 Al-Anon meetings for loved ones of sex addicts, though the fluorescent-lit church basement and the circle of exhausted faces had made her feel like she was admitting defeat before the battle had truly begun. Owen was transparent, or so it seemed. He gave her his phone password. He showed her his therapy appointment confirmations. He invited her to meet his sponsor, a soft-spoken man named Gene who'd been sober for 12 years and spoke about recovery with the reverence of someone who'd glimpsed hell and chosen to climb out. "Owen's one of the good ones," Gene told Tamara over coffee while Owen was in the restroom. "He does the work. Shows up even when it's hard. That counts for something." It counted for everything to Tamara, who wanted so desperately to believe that love could be enough, that her love could be the anchor that kept Owen from drifting back into old patterns. They moved in together after 18 months. Owen's lease was up, and it seemed like the natural next step. He brought his minimalist furniture and his library of recovery books and a framed photograph of his late grandmother, the only family member who'd never given up on him. For a while, life felt beautifully ordinary. They established routines, Sunday morning farmers market runs, Tuesday night cooking experiments that often ended in laughter and takeout, Friday date nights that Owen never canceled. He was present, attentive, affectionate in ways that made Tamara's friends jealous. "You found a good one," her mother said during a FaceTime call, her face warm with approval. "Bring him home for Christmas. Your daddy wants to meet him." But beneath the surface, hairline fractures were spreading. It started small. A browser history that didn't quite make sense, Owen had supposedly been researching literacy programs, but the timestamp showed 3:47 a.m., and he'd been asleep beside her. Or had he? Must be a glitch, Owen said when she mentioned it casually, too casually. You know how Safari is. Then there were the late-night grocery store runs for items they didn't need. The new password on his laptop, for work security, he explained. The way his eyes would glaze over during conversations, like he was somewhere else entirely. Tamara told herself she was being paranoid. Hyper-vigilant. Owen was in recovery. People in recovery had bad days, struggled with triggers, but that didn't mean they were relapsing. Right. She found the first real evidence on a rainy Tuesday in March, 2 years into their relationship. Owen was in the shower, and his phone, left carelessly on the kitchen counter, buzzed with a notification. Tamara's hand moved before her conscience could stop her. Instagram notification at Scarlet Dreams _ liked your photo. She clicked through, her heart already sinking. Owen's Instagram, which he'd told her he barely used, showed recent activity. Photos liked. Comments left on profiles of women in lingerie, influencers whose entire feed was strategically posed thirst traps. Nothing explicit. Nothing she could point to as definitive proof. But the pattern was there, undeniable. She was still staring at the screen when Owen emerged from the bathroom, towel around his waist, steam following him like a ghost. Tam. His voice shifted when he saw his phone in her hands. What are you doing? Whose Scarlet Dreams? The question came out harder than she'd intended. Owen's face went through a series of emotions, surprise, guilt, defensiveness, before settling on something that looked like exhaustion. She's nobody. Just Instagram. I was scrolling, I wasn't thinking. You told me you deleted Instagram. Tamara's voice shook. You said it was a trigger. You said. I know what I said. Owen sat heavily on the couch, water dripping from his hair onto the cushions. I re-downloaded it a few weeks ago. I thought I could handle it. Just for work stuff, following literacy organizations. But then the algorithm. It starts showing you other things. And I wasn't strong enough to. Are you using again? The question hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. No. God, no. I'm not acting out, I swear. It's just looking. I know that's still a problem. I know it's part of my addiction, but I haven't crossed any real lines. I haven't messaged anyone, haven't met anyone. Looking is a line, Owen. Tamara's voice cracked. You told me you were sober. You stood in front of me and promised. I am sober. Owen stood, desperation bleeding into his voice. This is a slip, not a relapse. There's a difference. I'll call Jean right now, I'll delete the app, I'll add another meeting. You've been lying to me for weeks. The words settled between them with terrible finality. Owen's shoulders sagged. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry. I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see me as broken. Again. Tamara wanted to scream, to throw his phone across the room, to pack a bag and leave. Instead, she found herself moving toward him, her hand touching his damp shoulder. You have to tell me the truth, she said quietly. Always. Even when it's ugly. Especially when it's ugly. I can't help you if you hide from me. Owen nodded, pulling her into an embrace that felt equal parts desperate and grateful. I'll do better. I promise. I'll be better. It was the first promise he would break. But not the last. The slip became a pattern. Every few months, Tamara would discover something, a deleted browser history, a charge on their credit card for a website she didn't recognize, a moment when Owen's eyes followed a woman just a bit too long. Each time, the same cycle, confrontation, tears, promises, a brief period of renewed vigilance, then a slow slide back into secrecy. Owen increased his therapy sessions. He went to meetings daily instead of 3 times a week. He installed accountability software on his devices, giving Tamara access to the reports. But addiction, Tamara was learning, was a shapeshifter. It found new ways to survive. Maybe it's time to consider inpatient treatment, Owen's therapist suggested during a joint session that felt more like an intervention. A 30-day program could give you the intensive support you need. Owen's hand tightened on Tamara's. I can't take 30 days off work. And I can't leave Tamara alone that long. I'll do better. I just need to try harder. But trying harder wasn't working. Tamara watched the man she loved disappear by degrees, present physically but absent in every way that mattered. He stopped initiating sex, then stopped responding to her advances, trapped in some cycle of shame and compulsion she couldn't penetrate. Her own life began to shrink. She stopped meeting friends for happy hour, too exhausted to pretend everything was fine. She called in sick to work on mornings when she'd spent the night crying, when the thought of teaching children about hope and possibility felt like the cruelest irony. You're losing yourself, Shanice told her bluntly one afternoon, cornering her at the grocery store. We barely see you anymore. And when we do, you look like a ghost. This man is killing you, Tam. He's sick, Tamara said, defensive. He needs support. And who's supporting you? Who's taking care of Tamara while she's busy trying to save Owen? The question haunted her. Because the answer was, no one. She was pouring from an empty cup, drowning in the act of saving someone who didn't seem to want to be saved. The breaking point came on a suffocatingly hot night in July, 3 years into their relationship. Tamara came home early from a summer professional development workshop, exhausted and eager to collapse on the couch with Owen and mindless television. The apartment was dark except for the blue glow emanating from their bedroom. She found Owen at his laptop, headphones on, completely absorbed. The images on the screen were explicit, graphic, everything he'd promised he'd walked away from. His hand was moving, his face slack with that familiar absence, and he didn't even notice her standing in the doorway until she gasped. Tamara. Owen slammed the laptop shut, but the damage was irreversible. I can explain. Don't. Her voice was eerily calm. Don't explain. Don't apologize. Don't tell me you'll do better. Please, I had a hard day, I wasn't thinking. You're never thinking. The calm shattered. 3 years, Owen. 3 years of promises and therapy and meetings and second chances. And you're still here. Still choosing this over me. Over us. It's not a choice, it's an addiction. I know it's an addiction. Tamara's voice cracked. I've read the books, been to the meetings, held your hand through every slip and relapse. But at some point, Owen, you have to choose recovery. You have to choose to fight. And you're not fighting. You're just surviving. And I can't do this anymore. Owen stood, reaching for her. She stepped back. If you leave me, I don't know what I'll do, he said, and there was something manipulative in the vulnerability, something that made Tamara's stomach turn. That's not fair. You can't make your recovery my responsibility. I'm not. I love you. Please don't give up on me. And there it was, the hook that had caught her from the beginning. His brokenness calling to something in her that needed to fix, to save, to prove that love could conquer even the darkest demons. She should have left that night. Should have packed her bags and called Shanice and never looked back. Instead, she made the decision that would eventually lead her to a courtroom in handcuffs. One more chance, she heard herself say. But this time, we do it my way. Tamara's plan was born from desperation and the dangerous conviction that she could succeed where professionals had failed. If Owen wouldn't commit to inpatient treatment, she would create her own version at home. She started monitoring everything. His phone had a tracking app that showed his location at all times. She changed all the passwords on their devices. The only way he could access the internet was through her. She called his work to confirm his schedule, drove him to and from his therapy appointments, attended every SAA meeting with him. This is intense, Jean said carefully after one meeting where Tamara had physically positioned herself between Owen and the coffee station where an attractive woman was standing. Recovery has to come from within. You can't force someone to be sober. I'm just supporting him, Tamara insisted, but even she could hear the edge of mania in her voice. Owen, for his part, seemed relieved to surrender control. He handed over his phone each morning like a child being sent to school, accepted the parental controls and location tracking without protest. He came home immediately after work, sat beside Tamara on the couch for approved television shows, went to bed at the same time she did. From the outside, it might have looked like progress. From the inside, it felt like suffocation. Tamara stopped sleeping through the night, startling awake every few hours to check Owen's location on the app, to make sure he was still beside her in bed. She lost weight she couldn't afford to lose, her clothes hanging loose on her frame. Dark circles bloomed under her eyes like bruises. "Miss Collins, are you feeling all right?" Principal Morrison asked gently after Tamara snapped at a student for the first time in her teaching career. "You've seemed strained lately." "I'm fine," Tamara lied, the words automatic. "Just tired." But she wasn't fine. She was unraveling, thread by thread, her entire identity becoming consumed by the impossible task of keeping Owen sober through sheer force of will. The irony was that her hypervigilance was creating exactly what she feared most. Owen, stripped of all privacy and autonomy, began to rebel in small ways. A work trip that couldn't be verified. A therapy appointment that ran suspiciously long. Moments when his phone's location showed him somewhere other than where he'd claimed to be. "Where were you?" Tamara demanded one evening when Owen arrived home 45 minutes late. "I told you, I stopped for gas. The app shows you were at a parking lot on Peachtree Street. There's no gas station there." Owen's jaw tightened. "I needed a moment alone. To breathe." "Is that a crime now?" "When you're in recovery, yes. You don't get to have secrets. And you don't get to be my warden." Owen shouted, his composure finally cracking. "I'm a grown man, Tamara. I'm trying. I'm doing everything you ask. But you're treating me like I'm 1 second away from burning everything down." "Because you are." Tamara shot back. "Every time I trust you, you prove I shouldn't. Every time I give you space, you use it to." "To what? Exist? Have a moment of privacy without you monitoring my every breath." The fight escalated until they were both screaming, years of resentment and fear and exhaustion pouring out in toxic waves. It ended with Owen grabbing his keys and storming out, and Tamara collapsing on the kitchen floor, watching his location ping on her phone as he drove aimlessly through Atlanta for 3 hours before finally coming home. They didn't speak for 2 days after that. The silence in their apartment was deafening. Here's something I need you to think about. When does protecting someone you love cross the line into controlling them? When does support become suffocation? Drop your thoughts below, because what Tamara did next, she did out of love. Or at least, that's what she told herself. The idea came to her during a particularly dark 3 a.m. spiral, Owen sleeping fitfully beside her while Tamara scrolled through recovery forums on her phone, searching for answers that didn't exist. She found a thread discussing therapeutic boundaries, partners who'd taken extreme measures to help their addicted loved ones. One woman had moved her husband to a remote cabin with no internet for 6 months. Another had implemented a strict schedule that eliminated all triggers. A third had. Tamara stopped scrolling, her heart pounding. A third had used medication. The post was clinical, carefully worded. "My husband's psychiatrist prescribed SSRIs which helped reduce his compulsive urges. Combined with therapy, it gave him the breathing room he needed to work on recovery without constantly battling cravings." SSRIs. Selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Antidepressants that, as a side effect, often decreased libido and sexual function. Tamara's mind raced. Owen had mentioned once that his therapist had suggested medication, but he'd refused, saying he wanted to do recovery naturally. But what if that was pride talking? What if medication could be the tool that finally helped him succeed? She brought it up the next morning, tentatively. "What if you talked to a psychiatrist about medication? Just to take the edge off while you work on the deeper issues." Owen was pouring coffee, his back to her. "I told you, I don't want to be medicated. I need to learn to manage this on my own. But what if you can't? What if your brain chemistry is working against you? There's no shame in getting help, Owen. I said no, Tamara. His voice was firm. I appreciate the suggestion, but that's my boundary. Okay. She should have respected that boundary. Should have dropped it and found another way forward, or accepted that maybe there was no way forward at all. Instead, she went to a different doctor. The lie started small, almost reasonable in Tamara's fractured logic. She made an appointment with her own primary care physician, Dr. Patel, a kind woman who'd treated Tamara's occasional migraines and annual physicals for 5 years. I've been feeling really anxious lately, Tamara said, which wasn't a lie. Trouble sleeping, racing thoughts, can't seem to relax. I think I might need something to help. Dr. Patel nodded sympathetically, her eyes concerned behind wire-rimmed glasses. Given the stress you're under, you mentioned your partner's health issues at your last visit. This isn't surprising. Let's start you on a low dose of Zoloft. 50 milligrams daily. It should help with the anxiety and improve your sleep. Tamara left the pharmacy with a bottle of pills prescribed in her name, her hands shaking as she gripped the steering wheel. She wasn't going to take them. They were for Owen, to help him, to save him, to give him the chemical assist his brain clearly needed even if his pride wouldn't let him ask for it. That evening, she crushed one pill into powder using the back of a spoon, her movements methodical, clinical. She stirred it into Owen's protein shake, the chocolate one he had every morning after his run, thick enough to mask any taste or texture. Here you go, babe, she said, handing him the glass with a smile that felt like it might crack her face. Owen drank it without question, kissed her cheek, and headed to shower. Tamara stood in the kitchen, staring at her trembling hands, trying to silence the voice screaming that she'd just crossed a line from which there was no return. It's for his own good, she told herself. He'll thank me when it works. When he finally gets better. The changes were gradual. Over the next 3 weeks, Owen seemed calmer, less agitated. The desperate edge that had haunted his eyes began to soften. He stopped having the restless nights where Tamara would wake to find him pacing the apartment at 2 a.m. His therapy sessions, he reported, were going better. I don't know what shifted, he told her one evening, genuine wonder in his voice. But I feel like maybe I'm finally turning a corner. The obsessive thoughts are quieter. I can breathe. Guilt twisted Tamara's stomach, but she pushed it down. See, she told herself. You were right. He needed this. He's getting better. She increased his dose to 75 milligrams after a month, then to 100 after 6 weeks. Owen continued to improve, or so it seemed. His sex drive diminished significantly, which he attributed to stress and therapy work. His compulsive behaviors decreased. He smiled more, laughed easier. Tamara began to believe her own rationalization. She was helping. This was love. This was what partners did. They made hard choices when their loved ones couldn't make them for themselves. But addiction doesn't disappear with medication. It just learns to adapt. The first sign of trouble came on a Saturday morning 3 months into Tamara's secret intervention. She was doing laundry when she found a receipt in Owen's jeans pocket, a coffee shop across town, nowhere near any of his usual routes. The timestamp showed 11:47 a.m. on a Wednesday, during what he'd told her was a therapy appointment. Her hands went cold. She checked the tracking app. It showed him at his therapist's office that entire hour. But the receipt didn't lie. When Owen came home from his morning run, still faithfully drinking his medicated protein shake, Tamara confronted him, trying to keep her voice level. Can you explain this? She held up the receipt. Owen's face went through now familiar contortions. I stopped for coffee after therapy. I must have forgotten to mention it. The therapist is in Buckhead. This coffee shop is in Decatur. Why would you drive 30 minutes out of your way? Silence. Then, I needed to clear my head. The session was intense. Owen, I didn't do anything wrong. His voice rose, defensive. I got coffee. That's it. But you're interrogating me like I committed a crime. When does this end, Tamara? When do I get to be trusted again? The question hung between them, sharp and justified. Because he was right, she didn't trust him. Couldn't trust him. And the medication she'd been secretly administering wasn't fixing the fundamental brokenness between them, it was just masking it. That night, while Owen slept, Tamara hacked into his email, another line crossed, another boundary obliterated. What she found made her blood run cold. Messages to and from an unknown address. Coded language that might have been innocent but felt sinister. Plans to meet. Times and locations that coincided with his unexplained absences. He was still acting out. The medication hadn't cured him. It had just made him a more functional addict. The confrontation the next morning was nuclear. Tamara laid out the evidence, the receipt, the emails, the timeline of lies. Owen went pale, then red, his hands shaking with rage or shame or both. You went through my email? You've been tracking me like a criminal. You've been lying to me. Meeting someone behind my back. It's not what you think. Then what is it, Owen? Make it make sense. He broke then, crumpling onto the couch with his head in his hands. Her name is Vanessa. She's in the program. SAA. We started talking after meetings, just coffee, conversation. Someone who understood. I wasn't acting out, Tamara. I swear. I just needed someone who didn't look at me like I was about to explode. You were having an emotional affair. I was surviving. Owen looked up, his eyes wet. You turned our relationship into a prison. Every move monitored, every breath accounted for. I love you, but you're suffocating me. And I don't know how to save us anymore. I don't know if we can be saved. The words hit like physical blows. Because beneath the anger and betrayal, Tamara knew he was right. She'd become so consumed with controlling Owen's recovery that she'd destroyed the very relationship she was trying to protect. Maybe. Her voice broke. Maybe we need to separate. Take some space. Maybe, Owen echoed, and the resignation in his voice felt like an ending. But Tamara couldn't let go. Wouldn't let go. Because if Owen left, if their relationship ended, it would mean everything. All the sacrifices, all the pain, all the boundaries she'd demolished, had been for nothing. That's when the darkest thought took root. If I can't save him, I'll make sure no one else has him. The thought terrified her even as it grew, spreading through her mind like poison ivy. She refilled her Zoloft prescription the next day, this time requesting a higher dose. But instead of giving it to Owen, she started researching. What would happen if someone took too much? What were the symptoms? Could it be permanent? Tamara stood at the edge of an abyss, teetering between love and obsession, between helping and harming. And the worst part? She couldn't tell the difference anymore. The human mind is capable of extraordinary rationalization when backed into a corner. Tamara discovered this as she sat at her kitchen table at 2 a.m., her laptop glowing in the darkness, searching for answers to questions she never should have asked. Serotonin syndrome. Overdose symptoms. Long-term effects of SSRI abuse. She wasn't planning to hurt Owen, or at least, that's what she told herself. She was just researching. Understanding her options. Knowledge was power, and she'd felt powerless for so long. But deep down, in the part of herself she couldn't bear to examine, Tamara knew the truth. She was spiraling into something dark and irreversible. Owen had moved into their guest bedroom after their explosive fight, a temporary arrangement that felt increasingly permanent. They circled each other like wary strangers, their conversations reduced to logistical necessities. He still went to meetings, still saw his therapist, but he'd changed his phone password and disabled location sharing. I need to do recovery on my own terms, he'd said firmly. I appreciate everything you've tried to do, Tam, but this isn't healthy for either of us anymore. The loss of control sent Tamara into a tailspin. Without access to his devices, his location, his daily movements, the anxiety consumed her. She called in sick to work 3 days in a row, unable to focus on anything beyond the gnawing certainty that Owen was slipping away, into relapse, into Vanessa's arms, into a life that didn't include her. Her friends had stopped calling after too many cancelled plans. Her mother's concerned voicemails went unanswered. The principal had started asking pointed questions about her wellness and commitment to her students. Tamara's entire world had contracted to the 4 walls of an apartment that now felt like a mausoleum. On a gray Tuesday afternoon, everything shattered. Tamara came home early, another day of classes she couldn't face, to find Owen in the living room with his laptop open. He wasn't hiding what he was doing. Didn't snap the computer shut or angle it away. He simply looked at her with exhausted eyes and said, "We need to talk. Are you using again?" The question came out flat, defeated. "No." Owen closed the laptop carefully. "But I'm leaving. I've been looking at sober living homes. There's one in Marietta that has an opening next week. I think I need to be somewhere I can focus entirely on recovery without me." Tamara's voice cracked. "You're leaving me." "I'm leaving this situation," Owen corrected gently. "We've become toxic for each other, Tam. You can't see it because you're too close, but we're drowning each other. I need structure, accountability from people who aren't emotionally invested. And you need to remember who you are beyond being my caretaker." "I know who I am." "Do you?" Owen stood, and there was something like pity in his expression that made Tamara want to scream. "When's the last time you saw Shanice? Called your mom without lying about how you're doing? Went to work without it feeling like torture? I've watched you disappear trying to save me, and I won't let you destroy yourself anymore. You don't get to make that choice for me. And you don't get to make choices for me. Like drugging me." The words landed like a bomb in the quiet apartment. Tamara's heart stopped, her face draining of color. "What?" Owen pulled a small amber bottle from his pocket, her prescription bottle, the one she'd hidden in the back of the bathroom cabinet behind tampons and cleaning supplies. "I found these last week," he said quietly. "Zoloft, prescribed to you, but you've never taken antidepressants. And I started feeling different a few months ago. Calmer in ways that didn't feel earned. So I started paying attention. The protein shakes you insisted on making. The way you watched me drink them like you were waiting for something." Tamara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Her carefully constructed rationalization crumbled, leaving only the ugly truth. "I had my therapist order a blood test," Owen continued, his voice eerily calm. "Tested for everything. The sertraline showed up. You've been medicating me without my knowledge or consent for months. I was trying to help you. You were trying to control me." Owen's composure cracked, his voice rising. "Do you understand what you've done? That's assault, Tamara. That's a felony. You could go to prison for this. I love you. Everything I did was because I love you." "That's not love." Owen's eyes filled with tears. "Love doesn't drug someone. Love doesn't violate every boundary and call it care. You need help, Tam. Serious help. And I can't be the one to give it to you anymore." He moved toward the door, a duffel bag Tamara hadn't noticed sitting ready beside the couch. "Wait." Tamara lunged forward, grabbing his arm. "Please. Don't go. I'll stop. I'll get help. I've already called Gene. He's waiting outside. I'm staying with him tonight, then checking into the sober living facility tomorrow." Owen gently extracted his arm from her grip. "I've also called my lawyer. I'm not pressing charges, Tamara. But if you try to contact me, if you show up at my meetings or the facility, I will. Do you understand? You can't just leave. Watch me." The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like thunder. Tamara stood in the empty apartment, her reflection staring back from the darkened television screen, a stranger with wild eyes and trembling hands, someone she didn't recognize. The person she'd become in the name of love. The next 72 hours blurred into a nightmare of sleepless nights and frantic attempts to reach Owen that went unanswered. Tamara called Jean's phone 23 times before he blocked her number. She drove to the sober living facility in Marietta, only to be turned away by staff who'd clearly been warned about her. "Ma'am, if you don't leave the premises, we'll call the police," a burly security guard said, not unkindly. Tamara sat in her car in that parking lot for 4 hours, watching the building's windows like a detective in a noir film, hoping to catch a glimpse of Owen. She didn't. Eventually, someone did call the police, and a weary officer suggested she move along before this becomes a bigger problem. On the 4th day, Shanice showed up at her door with coffee and the expression that brooked no argument. "Okay, I don't know what's going on, but you look like death, you're not answering calls, and the school said you haven't been in all week. Talk now." Tamara broke. The whole sordid story poured out: Owen's addiction, her escalating attempts to control his recovery, the medication, his discovery, his departure. Shanice listened with widening eyes, her coffee going cold in her hands. "Tam." Shanice's voice was careful. "Baby, you need to hear this. What you did was not okay. That wasn't love. That was—" "I know." Tamara's voice cracked. "I know it wasn't okay. But I didn't know what else to do. I was so scared of losing him that I lost myself instead. You need to talk to someone. A therapist. Today. I need Owen." "No." Shanice's voice was firm. "You need help. Owen needs space. And you need to accept that you can't fix this, Tam. Some things are just broken." But Tamara couldn't accept that. Wouldn't accept that. Because if she accepted it, she'd have to face what she'd become, and that was a mirror she couldn't bear to look into. The breaking point came on a Friday night, 10 days after Owen left. Tamara had been drinking, something she rarely did, working through a bottle of wine while scrolling through old photos of them together, torturing herself with memories of when things were good, were simple, were possible. Her phone buzzed. An Instagram notification. Owen Hendricks posted a photo. Her hands shaking, Tamara clicked through. The photo showed Owen at what looked like a group meeting, surrounded by people she didn't recognize. He looked lighter, healthier. The caption read, "Day 10 of recommitting to my recovery. Grateful for this community and the chance to start fresh. #recovery #oneity at a time. Start fresh." As if Tamara, and everything she'd sacrificed, was just something to be left behind and forgotten. The wine and heartbreak and months of accumulated desperation crystallized into a single, terrible decision. If Owen wouldn't talk to her, she'd make him listen. Tamara grabbed her keys, her purse, and the remaining pills from her prescription bottle. She didn't have a clear plan, just a burning need to see him, to make him understand, to force him to acknowledge that what they'd had was worth saving. The drive to Marietta was a blur. She'd had too much to drink. She knew that. Some distant rational part of her brain was screaming warnings, but she was beyond caring, beyond rationality, beyond everything except the desperate need to not be left behind. She didn't remember running the red light, didn't see the other car until it was too late. The impact was catastrophic. Metal screaming, glass shattering, the world spinning in impossible directions. When Tamara's car finally stopped moving, wrapped around a light pole 3 blocks from Owen's sober living facility, her first thought wasn't about pain or injury. It was, "Now he'll have to see me." The ambulance arrived within minutes. So did the police. A young officer found the prescription bottle scattered across the passenger seat, pills mixing with broken glass. Found Tamara's phone with Owen's Instagram still open. Found the breathalyzer results that showed she was well over the legal limit. "Ma'am, you're under arrest for DUI, the officer said as paramedics checked her for injuries. "You have the right to remain silent." As they read her rights, Tamara started laughing, a broken, hysterical sound that made the paramedics exchange worried glances. Because this was it. This was the bottom. And somehow, even at rock bottom, she was still thinking about Owen. Still choosing him over herself. The Fulton County Jail was nothing like the sanitized versions Tamara had seen on television. It was harsh fluorescent lights that never dimmed, the smell of industrial cleaner failing to mask human desperation, and the constant cacophony of voices, arguing, crying, laughing with edges sharp enough to cut. Tamara sat on a metal bench in the holding cell, her wrist in a brace from the accident, her mind strangely quiet for the first time in months. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving only a profound exhaustion and the dawning horror of what she'd done. Not just the DUI. Not just the accident that had, by some miracle, only resulted in property damage and minor injuries to the other driver. But everything. The entire trajectory of choices that had led her to this moment, wearing an orange jumpsuit in a jail cell at 34 years old. Tamara Collins. A guard appeared at the cell door. You made bail. Let's go. Shanice was waiting in the lobby, her face a mixture of relief and disappointment that made Tamara want to sink through the floor. Don't, Shanice said as Tamara opened her mouth. Not here. Let's just get you home. The drive was silent until Shanice finally spoke, her voice tight with controlled emotion. Your mom put up her house to bail you out. Your mom, Tam. The woman who worked 2 jobs to put you through college. She had to risk her home because you drove drunk trying to stalk your ex-boyfriend. He's not my ex. Yes, he is. Shanice's hands tightened on the steering wheel. And you need to start accepting that before you destroy what's left of your life. The school put you on administrative leave. The DUI charge is serious. And if that other driver decides to press additional charges. She trailed off, the implications hanging heavy in the air. Tamara stared out the window, watching Atlanta blur past. I don't know who I am anymore. Then it's time to figure it out. And you're going to start by calling the therapist whose number I'm going to give you. Today. Not tomorrow. Today. Dr. Michaela Chen's office was in a quiet building in Decatur, her waiting room decorated with plants and soft lighting that felt deliberately calm. Tamara sat in the overstuffed chair across from her. This black woman in her 50s with kind eyes and an expression that suggested she'd heard it all. Tell me what brought you here, Dr. Chen said simply. And Tamara talked. For the first time, she told the whole story without trying to justify or rationalize. Owen's addiction, her escalating attempts to control it, the medication, the stalking, the DUI. All of it. The words poured out like poison being lanced from a wound. Dr. Chen listened without interruption, taking occasional notes. When Tamara finally fell silent, the therapist leaned forward slightly. Tamara, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to really think about your answer. Not what you think I want to hear, but the truth. Why did you stay? I loved him. That's the easy answer. Go deeper. Why did you stay with someone whose addiction was consuming you both? Tamara opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. Because, if I could save him, it would mean I was worth something. That I wasn't disposable. The word hung in the air, and suddenly Tamara was crying. Deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere she'd been avoiding for years. Maybe her entire life. My father left when I was 8, she heard herself say. Just didn't come home one day. And my mom never talked about it, never explained. She just worked harder, smiled brighter, pretended everything was fine. And I learned that love meant sacrificing yourself. That you had to be perfect, had to do everything right, or people would leave. Dr. Chen handed her tissues, her expression gentle. And Owen's addiction gave you a mission. A way to prove you were worthy of staying. But I made it worse. I became obsessive, controlling. I violated him in ways I can't take back. You did, Dr. Chen agreed, not sugarcoating it. And you'll have to live with that. But Tamara, you're not a monster. You're someone with untreated trauma who got lost trying to save someone else instead of saving herself. The question now is, what are you going to do about it? The legal proceedings moved slowly, giving Tamara time she didn't want to face the wreckage of her life. The DUI charge came with mandatory counseling, community service, and a suspended license. The other driver, a middle-aged man named Richard Thompson, had initially considered a civil suit but, after learning about Tamara's circumstances, had shown unexpected mercy. "I've had my own struggles," he told her at a mediation session, his arm still in a sling from the accident. "I'm not excusing what you did. But I've been to dark places too. I hope you get the help you need." His grace made Tamara cry harder than any punishment could have. But the legal system wasn't done with her. 3 weeks after the accident, Owen's lawyer contacted her attorney with new information. Owen had been keeping records, dates, times, evidence of the medication in his system, medical documentation of the effects. He wasn't pressing criminal charges for the drugging, but he was pursuing a restraining order and wanted it on record in case Tamara's behavior escalated further. The hearing was brief, procedural. Owen didn't attend. His lawyer presented the evidence dispassionately. The judge, a stern black woman with graying hair and no-nonsense demeanor, reviewed the documents with an expression that grew increasingly severe. "Ms. Collins," Judge Williams said, her voice cutting through the courtroom's hum, "do you understand the gravity of what you did? Administering medication to someone without their knowledge or consent is assault. The only reason you're not facing criminal charges is Mr. Hendrick's mercy, which frankly, is more than you deserve." "I understand, Your Honor," Tamara said quietly, her lawyer's hand on her arm. "I'm granting the restraining order. 500 feet, no contact of any kind. But I'm also ordering mandatory therapy and anger management classes." Judge Williams leaned forward. "I see a lot of people in this courtroom, Ms. Collins. Most of them are here because they made choices in moments of desperation. What separates those who change from those who don't is whether they take responsibility and do the work. I strongly suggest you be in the first category." "Yes, Your Honor." As Tamara left the courtroom, she felt something unexpected, relief. The legal consequences, the restrictions, the mandated therapy, they were boundaries she desperately needed. Structure imposed from outside because she'd lost the ability to create it from within. Here's a question I need you to consider. Is it possible to love someone and still hurt them terribly? Can good intentions lead to unforgivable actions? Drop a comment with your thoughts, because Tamara's journey was far from over, and the hardest work was still ahead. The months that followed were the most difficult of Tamara's life. Harder than her father leaving, harder than any heartbreak she'd endured. Because this time, she couldn't run from the pain. She had to sit in it, examine it, understand how a good person had made such devastating choices. Dr. Chen became her anchor. Twice a week, Tamara sat in that plant-filled office and did the brutal work of unpacking her trauma, her codependency, the way she'd confused love with sacrifice and control with care. "You weren't trying to save Owen," Dr. Chen said during one particularly breakthrough session. "You were trying to save the 8-year-old girl whose father left, proving that if you just tried hard enough, did enough, sacrificed enough, you could make someone stay. But Tamara, you can't earn love. It's freely given, or it's not love at all." Tamara also attended Al-Anon meetings, support groups for loved ones of addicts. There, surrounded by people who understood the particular hell of loving someone with addiction, she began to understand that she wasn't uniquely broken. She was part of a pattern, a cycle that many fell into. "I tried to hide his bottles," one woman shared at a meeting. "Poured out his vodka, thought I was helping. But you can't want their sobriety more than they do. That's not help. That's enabling with a different mask." Slowly, painfully, Tamara rebuilt. She returned to work after her administrative leave, though the whispers in the faculty lounge followed her. Principal Morrison called her in for a meeting that Tamara was certain would end in her termination. Instead, the principal said, "I know you're going through something difficult. The school board wanted me to let you go, but I fought for you. You're a good teacher, Tamara. Your students need you. But you need to be present, really present. Can you do that?" "Yes," Tamara said, and meant it. "I can." She reconnected with her students, pouring the love she'd misdirected at Owen into lesson plans and reading groups. She stayed late to tutor struggling readers, arrived early to prepare engaging activities. Teaching, she remembered, had been her first love, her calling before she'd lost herself in someone else's crisis. Her friendships, damaged by months of neglect and lies, required patience to repair. Shanice was the first to truly forgive her, though it took honest conversations and consistent proof that Tamara was changing. "I'm sorry," Tamara told her over coffee 6 months after the accident. "For disappearing. For lying. For becoming someone you couldn't recognize." "I'm sorry I didn't intervene harder," Shanice replied. "I saw you drowning and I didn't know how to throw you a lifeline you'd actually grab. But Tam, you look different now. Lighter. I feel different. Like I'm finally waking up from a nightmare." The most difficult reconciliation was with her mother. Tamara drove to Savannah 9 months after the accident, her heart hammering as she sat in her childhood kitchen. "Mama, I need to tell you about Daddy leaving." Her mother's face closed off, the way it always did when the past came knocking. "Tamara, that was almost 30 years ago. But it still matters. Because I never processed it, and it broke something in me. Made me think love meant destroying yourself to keep someone else whole. And I need to understand what happened so I can finally heal." Her mother was quiet for a long moment, then sighed deeply. "Your father struggled with gambling. Lost our savings 3 times over. I put up with it for years, trying to love him better, trying to fix him. Until one day I realized I was teaching you that women should accept being treated as less than. So I told him to leave. Made the hard choice." "You chose yourself," Tamara said softly. "You chose me." "I did. And you need to choose yourself too, baby. That man, Owen, he wasn't yours to fix. Your life is yours to fix. Promise me you'll remember that." "I promise, Mama." A year after the accident, Tamara received an unexpected letter. No return address, but she recognized Owen's handwriting immediately. Her hands shook as she opened it, Dr. Chen's words echoing. "You can read it, but you don't have to respond. His healing is his own, just as yours is your own." The letter was brief. "Tamara, I'm writing this against my sponsor's advice, but I felt you deserved to know. I'm 18 months sober now. Really sober, doing the work, facing my demons instead of running from them. The sober living facility saved my life. I've done a lot of therapy around what happened between us. I don't hate you. I understand, in a way I couldn't when I left, that you were sick too. Codependency is its own addiction, and you were as trapped in it as I was in mine. I forgive you for what you did. And I hope you've forgiven yourself. I also hope you found help, found healing, found your way back to the person you were before addiction. Mine and yours, consumed us both. I won't contact you again. We both need clean breaks to truly heal. But I wanted you to know, you're not a monster. You're someone who loved badly, but who loved. There's redemption in that, if you choose to find it. Be well, Tamara. Be whole, Owen." Tamara read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Not tears of regret or longing, but of release. Owen was okay. He was healing. And most importantly, he was doing it without her, which is exactly what they both needed. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in a box with other artifacts from that chapter of her life, a chapter she was finally ready to close. 2 years after the accident, Tamara stood in front of a room full of women at an Al-Anon meeting, her hands steady, her voice clear. "My name is Tamara, and I'm codependent. I almost destroyed my life trying to save someone who didn't ask to be saved. I crossed lines I never thought I'd cross. I became someone I didn't recognize." She paused, looking at the faces around the circle, other women and men who understood the particular devastation of loving an addict. "But I also learned that hitting bottom sometimes means you finally stop digging. I got help. I did the work. I learned that love doesn't mean martyrdom, and that the only person I can save is myself." After the meeting, a young black woman approached her tentatively. "I'm new here. My boyfriend, he's addicted to prescription pills. And I've been trying so hard to manage it, to control it. But hearing your story..." Her voice broke. I think I'm heading down the same path you were on. Tamara took her hands gently. Then it's time to choose differently. Choose yourself. Not selfishly, but wisely. Because you can't love someone into recovery. They have to want it. And you have to want your own life more than you want to be their savior. How did you finally let go? I didn't have a choice, Tamara admitted. The choice was made for me when I crashed my car and ended up in jail. But if I could go back and tell my younger self one thing, it would be, the person drowning can't save the person drowning. You have to swim to shore yourself before you can throw anyone a lifeline. The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. Thank you. For being honest. For showing me there's a way through this. There is, Tamara said. It's hard, and it hurts, but there is. I promise. On a bright Saturday morning 3 years after the accident, Tamara stood in front of a small storefront in East Atlanta, a key in her hand and a smile on her face. The sign above the door read, Second Chances Literacy Center, where every story gets a new chapter. Shanice stood beside her, holding a bottle of champagne for the unofficial opening celebration. You really did it, Tam. I'm so proud of you. The Literacy Center had been Tamara's dream long before Owen, but she'd abandoned it during the years of crisis. Now, with her teaching career thriving again, her personal life rebuilt on healthier foundations, she'd finally had the space and strength to pursue it. The center would serve underprivileged children and adults, offering free tutoring, literacy programs, and a safe space for learning. Tamara had used her story, sanitized but honest, to secure grants and donations. She'd turned her pain into purpose. You know what the best part is? Tamara said, unlocking the door. This is mine. Not mine and someone else's dream I'm supporting. Not something I'm doing to prove my worth. Just mine. Something I built from my own healing. Inside, the space was warm and welcoming. Colorful rugs, bookshelves waiting to be filled, tables where futures would be changed one word at a time. Tamara's phone buzzed. A text from her mother. So proud of you, baby. Your daddy would be too, wherever he is. You chose yourself, and look what you built. That evening, Tamara sat in Dr. Chen's office for what would be one of their final regular sessions. You've done remarkable work, Dr. Chen said, reviewing her notes from 3 years of therapy. When you first came to me, you were lost in someone else's story. Now you're writing your own. I still have bad days, Tamara admitted. Days when I wonder if I'm enough, if I'll ever trust myself in a relationship again. That's human. Recovery isn't linear, from addiction, codependency, trauma, any of it. But Tamara, you've learned the most important lesson. You can't pour from an empty cup. You have to fill yourself first. I'm learning, Tamara said. Every day, I'm learning. As she left the session and walked to her car, Tamara reflected on the journey. Yes, she'd gone to jail. Yes, she'd lost months of her life to legal proceedings and mandated classes. Yes, she'd hurt someone she loved and damaged her own reputation in ways that still carried consequences. But she'd also found herself. The real Tamara, not the version defined by someone else's needs, not the woman trying to prove her worth through sacrifice, but the authentic, flawed, resilient woman who deserved her own love and care. She'd learned that endings could be beginnings. That rock bottom could be a foundation. That sometimes you had to lose everything to find what truly mattered. 5 years after the accident, Tamara was asked to speak at a conference on codependency and addiction. She stood on the stage, looking out at hundreds of faces, and told her story, the full story, holding nothing back. I married a sex addict, she said, her voice steady. And what I did next landed me in prison, not literally, though I was arrested. But I imprisoned myself in his addiction, in the desperate need to save someone who wasn't mine to save. She talked about the medication, the stalking, the crash. About the legal consequences and the therapy and the long, brutal work of rebuilding. But here's what I learned, she said, approaching the conclusion. Love is not sacrifice. Love is not control. Love is not destroying yourself so someone else can stay whole. Real love, the kind that heals instead of harms, starts with loving yourself enough to know your limits. To walk away when staying becomes toxic. To choose your own healing as fiercely as you'd choose anyone else's. The audience was silent, rapt. I can't change the past. I can't undo the harm I caused. But I can use my story to help others see the warning signs before they go as far as I did. I can stand here and say, if you're losing yourself in someone else's crisis, it's time to choose differently. Not selfishly. Wisely. Because you deserve your own love story, not just a supporting role in someone else's tragedy. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, dozens of people approached her, sharing their own stories, thanking her for her honesty, asking for guidance. Among them was a white man with kind eyes and gray threading through his dark hair. That took incredible courage, he said. I'm 7 years sober from sex addiction. And I just wanted to say, Owen was lucky to have someone who cared so much, even if the caring went wrong. I hope he found his way. I hope so too, Tamara said softly. And I hope you stay well. One day at a time, he replied with a smile that spoke of hard-won wisdom. As Tamara drove home that evening, she thought about the younger version of herself, the woman who'd climbed into a relationship with Owen looking for proof of her worth, who'd lost herself completely in the mission of saving him. She'd grieved that relationship, mourned the loss of who they might have been if circumstances had been different. But she'd also accepted a hard truth. Some people come into your life to teach you what you need to learn, even if the lesson is painful. Owen had taught her about boundaries, about the difference between helping and controlling, about the necessity of saving yourself first. And she'd taught herself something even more valuable, that she was worth saving. That her story didn't end with a man or a relationship or a devastating mistake. It continued, chapter after chapter, written in her own hand. Before we end, I want to leave you with this final thought. What would you do for love? Where would you draw the line between supporting someone and losing yourself? Tamara's story is extreme, but the underlying struggle, how much to sacrifice, when to stay, when to walk away, is universal. Drop a comment sharing your thoughts, and if this story moved you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more real, raw stories about love, loss, and finding your way back to yourself. Tamara Collins had married a sex addict. What she'd done next had landed her in handcuffs, in therapy, in the darkest period of her life. But it had also landed her here, whole, healed, and finally free. And that, she'd learned, was the only happy ending that truly mattered.